Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good morning, friends. I am in Chula Vista, California, and I was texting our family. We have a family group chat last night, and I said, I feel like I'm in Mexico. So I looked it up. I'm only 11 miles from Tijuana, Mexico. I had quite an adventure getting here. Traveling tip, never rent a car from Ace Car Rental. Oh my goodness, I'll spare you the details, but I barely made it. But I'm here with 23 more days to go. Very excited. And I want to correct something I said, I think last week. I said we had canceled our 9/12 event and we were going with 9/11. And they reached out and they said, you said that you're going with 9/11, but the website says 9/12. So the website's correct. We'll be meeting Thursday, September 12th. Sylvia Borgo will join me. You've heard her on the podcast quite a bit. And we're excited to meet you. So just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com/events and sign up. And we hope to see you there. And then we also have an event 9/22 in Santa Monica. Susan Tree and Vince will join me. That one's kind of planned around our national conference, the NACAT conference. And there's a chance Colorado College may also be joining us for that event as well. We should know that very shortly. That one's getting close to capacity, but it's still a little room. And our biggest event is in Redwood City, NorCal, halfway between San Jose and San Francisco on the 19th. And once again, you can still sign up there. Now, my schedule for the week, San Diego State University. I visit tomorrow. Now, I'll actually be right by San Diego State. As soon as I record this, I'm actually meeting a podcast listener in their home. How cool is that? Right by San Diego State. But I'll be touring San Diego State tomorrow morning, then touring UC San Diego the next day, Tuesday. Touring University of San Diego Wednesday, Point Loma Thursday, and Chapman on Friday. I'm definitely going to do a few college spotlights after this whole trip. I got 21 colleges on this trip, but I don't want to commit to which ones I'm doing yet. I'll make that decision after the trip based on a lot of factors, but I'll keep you posted. But your head might be spinning because I'm in like 10 different locations over the next 23 days. But for the next 6, I'm right here in San Diego, Chula Vista area. Now, today I want to share something with you I've been wanting to share with you for at least a year. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, and it has to do with how students and parents feel so much stress in this college process. And so I've been looking at what are the things, like tangible steps that you can take to decrease your stress. Or another way of putting it is, what are the things that when you can cross them off the to-do list, you can just feel like the tension coming out of your body? So I'm going to present 15 or 16 or so of these things with you today that you can just do a deep exhale when you can cross this to-do list off the list because you feel the stress coming out of your body. And I think it's another way of thinking about the process, a little different than how we've approached it before. You can think of each of these as a little mini goal and try to make this process less anxiety ridden. And, I think about the student I worked with last year, and she's like, this process is just really stress inducing. And I was like, well, it doesn't have to be that way. And she's like, yeah, it kind of does. Well, I still don't believe it has to be that way. And so I think you following this prescription, this plan, will be a great way to reduce that. I'm also going to share a recommended resource with you today. And then we're on to part 4 of Vince's excellent interview with Sarah Lovely looking at the arts and admissions, But without any further ado, let's dive into the list and let's talk about what these things are. So the first thing has to do with, you come into this process and you're just kind of a little overwhelmed. Like, where do I even start? And one thing that will help you take some stress out of your body is to understand who's going to be the team of people that's going to be helping you with this process. Now, in some cases, it's not a team. And in some cases, the team's much larger than others. But what roles different people have and who does what, having an understanding of that, that's helpful. You start to get a sense of not being as lost. It's like you're totally lost in the middle of nowhere. And now you're starting to feel a little bit, I think I might recognize that place. I think I may know where I am. So in some cases, there is a college counselor involved, and that could be a school-based counselor if you're at an independent school. If you're at a public school, it could be a school-based counselor, but it's very difficult. The research shows the average public school counselor spends 25 minutes in 4 years helping a student with the college process. It's just, the national average is over 400 to 1 counselors to students. And then think of all the other things school counselors are doing. I mean, they're doing schedule and logistics changes. They're doing crisis management counseling, personal counseling. They're doing things like detention duty. So it's difficult. They can play a role, and they will play a role, an important role. But it's hard for them to do all the orientation. But maybe you're affiliated with the CBO. Maybe you're working with an outside, external, independent educational counselor. Or maybe, like most people, it's a parent or a relative is helping you. But just assembling your team, knowing who's going to do what. And I realize these teams are different for different people, largely based on their resources, right? Some people have a writing specialist and all these different people, and other people wouldn't even dream of being able to have all of that. So this is going to vary tremendously, but just knowing who your team is and what role each person's going to play on your team, that's the first thing that I find a little stress out of the body. Okay, the things I'm going to list are not necessarily in the order that you will do them. And people's orders are going to be different. So just keep that in mind. This is not necessarily sequential. So another thing that's stressful is the test prep process, the test plan process. And here, a lot of the tension gets moved out of your body when you just come up with a plan. What am I talking about? Okay, are you going to do self-prep? If so, what sources are you going to use? Certain websites, certain books. Are you going to do group test prep? If so, who are you doing a group test prep with, and when are you starting? Are you going to do one-on-one? If so, once again, who are you going to use? When are you going to start? Are you going to do a combo, what we used to call a six-pack? Back in the day, I was actively involved in testing. I hired away the third-ranked person in Atlanta from Kaplan, and I had a full-time test prep person who worked with me. This is in 2011, 2012. Great, great, great guy until he decided to move to California and become an entrepreneur. And I said, you know what? Let me just outsource that to let, experts who do that, and I'll stay out of this, go to the test prep part. But I would see that once people got their test prep person and their plan, the stress it's like it just evaporated. Not all of it, but some of it. So what is the test prep plan? Second thing. Third, finances. Now, what do I mean by finances? So I did a whole segment on this 2 months ago, so I'm not going to go into it in detail like I did then, but it's basically everybody being on the same page about how you're going to pay for college. So clear communication between students and the parents. This is the most we can afford. Do we expect you to take out loans? Do we expect you to work? Do we expect you to work in the school year, in the summer? What's the most we'll pay for all colleges? Like a lot of times parents will say, I'll pay X amount for this school, but X amount for that school. So just having clarity about all that so there's no ambiguity, that's a big thing, because lingering in the back of people's minds oftentimes is money. And even for full pay families, they're not necessarily willing to pay full price for all schools. So once again, knowledge is power, right? So when you get clarity about this, it removes a lot of stress. Fourth is coming up with a college list, because that's kind of overwhelming. Like there's a couple thousand schools out there, and how do I know which ones I should apply to? Once you get the college list down, that is a huge source of diminished stress in your body. And you'll know you don't have a good college list if you're thinking any of the following things. And I know people are thinking this because people reach out and tell me this all the time. Have a college list, but I feel like it has too many stretch schools or reach schools. Always hearing that. So you've got over that hurdle. That's a big thing. Another thing is my list too long? Another thing is sometimes people have a fear they're not going to get in anywhere. So that's an indication they either don't have a balanced list, or they don't have a clear sense of what their chances are at the different schools on their list. And so all that adds stress. So getting a really good college list that's balanced and where you've got multiple probables or likelies that you'd be happy to go to and have a great college experience. Until you get to that point where you have multiple, and I'd say multiple meaning 3 at least, probable or likely schools that you would be happy to go to and you can have a great college experience, you haven't done a good job of building a college list. So that's in a big place that you can remove stress in your body. 5th would be the action plan, okay? So you've got people helping you. And once I say people literally may just be yourself. I had a family I worked with a while ago, and they said, we'd like to pay you to work with someone that we've almost adopted as a kid, as a son for us. This is a parent who lost this is a student who lost both his parents. Imagine losing both your parents, not in a car accident, to cancer in the same year, 10 months apart. So the relative got involved and helped him out. But the reason I bring this story up is because the student was literally flying solo. So when I talk about your team, sometimes not everybody's coming with a ton of resources. Not everybody even has parents. And not everybody even has access to community-based organizations. So whoever that team is, you've got them and everybody knows their role. All right, the action plan, though, until you have an action plan, you're still going to be feeling that benighted feeling. Sure, you've got the test prep plan in place. Extremely helpful. Okay, you're working on the college list. Now we're heading somewhere. But the action plan is like, what should I be doing now? And if there's a fear, like, I don't know if I'm doing the things I should be doing or the things I'm not doing I should be doing, then that's going to create stress. And by the way, this stress is as much with parents as it is with students. This is not just student stress. This is family stress. Parents want the best for their child, and they know this process is complicated, and they're trying to do their best and give them all the resources they have, and they're hoping everything works out. So having an action plan where you know what you should be doing month by month, that's going to really help a lot. And especially if we're talking about juniors in the spring to seniors in the fall. Like and I'm not recommending you start then, but I'm saying at that point, every month is so important. All right, next. And once again, this isn't necessarily in order, but you get your first college acceptance. Now, that is a source of diminished stress. A few weeks ago, we talked about direct admissions. And this can be great for that, right? Apply a few schools to direct admissions. We highlighted niches, direct admission, but Common App's really focusing on direct admission. In fact, I'm going to say something now. I said I had a recommended resource for this week. Just go to commonapp.org. Or you can even search Common App webinar. Common App's doing a webinar on the 10th to highlight direct admissions, how it works. They're now up to 125 schools. Remember last year, they're like in around 40, 45, about 125 in their Common App direct admit model. That can be an amazing way to have diminished stress. Now, Common Apps is a little different than niches. Niches is really open to all incomes. Common App focuses a lot more on under-resourced students in their approach. So they're a little different, but they're the same thing, right? And if you don't know what I'm referring to, really simply with direct admissions, instead of you applying and getting denied, rejected, or deferred, you put a lot of your information into a portal and colleges can go in there and admit you, and even with scholarships. So there's no admit deny process. It's just fill out a bunch of information and find out if you get in. Direct admission and rolling admission. Those are two great ways to get an early acceptance under your belt. And you'd be surprised, even for high achieving kids, how good of a feeling it is to get an acceptance or two. It just adds to their confidence and it diminishes their stress. It's really important. Okay, next is getting your personal statement done. That is a big accomplishment. That 650-word statement. It's personal because it's about you and it's making a statement, right? And it takes a lot to do it. Normally about 5 drafts, to really nail that thing. I mean, everybody's different. I've certainly seen people nail it in 3 drafts. I've seen that people that have taken closer to double 5. So every situation is different, but that's a big, big, big source of relief. I've got my main essay done, and that goes to all your Common App schools. And the many schools don't ask for more than that, other than the Common App portion. So, that's a big deal. So getting that personal statement done. All right, number 8, you get your scores. So the first time I mentioned test prep, it was you put your plan in place. But now it's you've got your scores. Once you get your scores, such a feeling of stress outside your body. I mean, in fact, I celebrate these times with my kids. I'm like, we got your college list, okay? We got your personal statement done, and now you've got your scores. Like, you are well on your way. Now, what does getting your scores mean? It means several things. I'm either happy with my scores. That's the ideal way. So many people had SAT scores just come out this week, and everybody's texting me their scores. And a lot of people did well on this administration. I mean, I saw really big surges. So I'm going to be really interested when the results come out to see. Remember, we're relatively new at this digital test. I'm really curious to see if how its norms compared to other tests, because just had a lot of people get great news. So anyway, that's going off on a tangent, but the best scenario is you get your scores, right? But other things could also check this box. It could be, I was talking to somebody I'm working with who didn't do as well yesterday. And, when we were having a conversation, I was talking with one of the parents, and I said, you know what? At least your student can know that they left it all on the floor. It reminds me of when I was in grad school and I had to learn Hebrew, and I'm terrible with languages. I was not good at languages in high school. I didn't like them, and I was not good at learning Greek and Hebrew. And I used to be at SMU until the wee hours of the morning. I spent 100 hours one summer trying to learn Hebrew. And I finally came to the conclusion, you just kind of suck when it comes to languages. But I still had a good feeling because I knew I gave it my all. And it's much better to have that feeling than to wonder, was I lazy? Did I really try my best? So even if you're like, you know what? I've taken this test 2 or 3 times. I put a lot of time and effort into it. Maybe I didn't get the score I wanted, but I'm done with the test. That still counts as getting your scores. Sure, there's not going to be the level of exuberance in that case, but it's still a big to-do that can be checked off. And here's another way that you can fulfill this one. I'm not applying with test scores. I mean, I have a family I'm working with, in Newport Beach. I'll see them on this trip. Right from the start when they came and I met with them, and it's the second time I've worked with them. But they were clear. They're like, our kid's not even taking the test. Interested in the UCs. Testing's not her thing. UCs don't need it. CSUs don't need it. So that still counts as getting your scores. I'm applying test optional. I've made that decision. I'm not thrilled with my test, but I'm not taking it anymore. Or Eureka, I love my scores. I'm done. Anyway, it's one thing off the to-do list. So that's a pretty big deal. Okay, next. Acceptance to a school you're excited about. I know what you're thinking. Stuck, I thought you already said acceptance. So, sure, sometimes that first acceptance is to a school you're really excited about, but there are a lot of other times when it's not. I'm just being honest. You get that first acceptance and you're excited to say I'm in. It's not always the same as, wow, I'm in a school I'm super excited to go to right now. Even if it's not your top choice, but maybe it's one of your top 3 choices or something. That's a really, really exciting time. And that's something off the to-do list. because I've seen the difference between when students get their first acceptance and maybe they applied to a school. And I never encourage people just to apply willy-nilly to schools they have no interest in whatsoever. But listen, people are humans. I talk about loving all your lists, but in reality, it's very difficult to like all schools exactly the same amount. I mean, you are human. All right, here's another one. All your recommendation writers have submitted their recs. That can be a source of stress. You've asked a rec writer to submit. You can go into Common App and see if they've done it. And, they haven't done it. And you're like, do I remind them again? How long do I wait? Then the thought starts going into people's head. What if they don't do it? What if they don't do it? Am I going to not be able to apply to schools? So when all the rec writers have submitted the recommendations, that's another take the air out of the balloon, diffuse the situation. That was a little tougher because you don't have as much control over it, but there are certainly things you can do. All right, here's another one. All your applications are turned in. Everyone is complete. All those custom prompts done. That's such a cool feeling. All right, here's the next one. You've got admitted to a school that's financially affordable. So it's one thing to have that financial conversation. But even when admits come in, if money's a factor, until you actually see what they're asking you to pay, there's still a little bit of stress in the back of your mind. It's like, gee, hope that we can afford it. And once again, even for full pay families, like they're not necessarily willing to pay anything for all schools. People tell me all the time, I'll pay X for this school, but I'll pay X for that school. All right, next. Your parents make you feel proud of where you're in. That is such a big deal to a kid. The rest of our lives we go, even as adults, we're trying to make our parents proud of us on a deeply subconscious level. And so parents, this is one you have a lot of control over, but you can't do it just by telling your student, oh, I'm proud of you no matter where you go. You have to really believe it. And they can tell. They can tell if you seem more excited about certain schools than others, or you only want to visit certain schools and you don't want to visit others. And they can tell, and that adds stress to their lives. But once they feel like you're proud of them, that's a huge, huge, huge deal. Remember the quote from Rick Clark, Georgia Tech? Students don't shed tears in this process because they don't get in. They shed tears because they didn't make their parents proud. I would add to that, feeling respected by your peers. I've certainly worked with many, many, many students whose parents were proud of them, and the student was struggling because they didn't feel like they were earning the respect of their peers. So I'm going to combine this into two. Like you've made your parents proud and you're feeling respected by your peers. All right. Almost done. Next up, you visit where you're in and you like it a lot. Because until you visit and you like it a lot, there's always going to be in the back of your mind, snap, what if I don't like it? So you're in with an affordable offer and you visit and you like it a lot. Next up, your grades in the fall are good. Because while you're going through this process, in the back of your mind, you're kind of wondering, like, and especially for certain schools, what if my grades aren't good enough and they fall? Like, even if I get in, are they going to rescind my offer? That adds stress. All right. And last one that I have here that's, true for almost everybody is you meet a friend or two that you like who's going to the school. Because until you meet somebody you like that's going to the school, there's still a little bit of social angst about, am I going to like them and are they going to like me? So that's why maybe you know somebody in advance that's already there. That helps if you like them. Or you get involved in online communities for admitted students and you meet some people you like. Maybe you find your roommate or whatever. That does a lot to help the social transition, is meeting someone going that you like. Now, certainly there are other things that I could have listed. One is you're through the interview process or the audition process and it goes well. I didn't list those because most people don't have interviews. Most people don't have auditions, but certainly for those who do, that could be a source of stress. There's certain things I didn't say in here because it's just my experience that they're not necessarily those big stress diffusers, even that there's still things you have to do, such as completing your activities list, completing the education section, or the family section or the profile section of the application. Those are all things. Or you got your resume done. One I almost listed was if you complete the SRAR, that thing is a pain, but I still don't think it rises to that level. So why do I share these things? Because if you can treat some of these things as to-dos and check marks off your checklist, I think you'll find that the stress just comes right out of your body, and you can approach this process and have it be a rewarding process. I mean, these visits to these schools should be a lot of fun. It can be a great time of family bonding, and it's your future. And for a lot of times for students, it's your freedom, because you felt like my parents are telling me what to do too much. I get a chance to go somewhere and kind of be my own person and discover myself. So there's a lot of excitement there, and I thought I'd do a little something different and just share the things from my experience where stress comes out of the body when these things get knocked off the to-do list.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 4 of Vince's interview with Sarah Lovely, Sarah continues discussing dance majors, and she talks about students who want to dance for a company. Sarah gives in-depth advice for music majors. Sarah talks about how a student can assess their level of talent. Sarah talks about summer programs. Sarah talks about specific advice for visual art majors, photography majors, and architecture majors. Sarah gives her advice for National Portfolio Day. Sarah tells us why she finds visual arts admissions officers are the best. And Sarah tells us a great resource to use. And Vince shares a few additional tips for visual artists. Listen and enjoy part 4 of 5.
Interestingly, I have also worked with many students who are dancers who are also interested in auditioning for companies. And that happens right after the college audition season. So it's usually,
Wow.
So, and I think it's Point Magazine. It's a great resource for that. And that entails sending your stuff to a lot of people, a lot of companies, and never hearing back. So that's a really good exercise to do too, is to send videos or send headshots and make connections with companies. And then there's various levels of companies that students might be placed into. But that is I'm not going to lie, that, the company route, it can be tough. But I've also had students go to companies, go to a trainee program or for a year and defer their college admission. So that can happen too. But it's nice that it doesn't happen at the same time.
Oh, that's interesting. And so have you had a student who went to a company and then decided, I think I want to go to college and I'm willing to audition? That experience probably would look to a college as a positive thing, probably.
Yeah, I've definitely had students do that. Yep. Okay. But at the same time, if I'm working with a student who's thinking about companies as a counselor, I would still have them apply to colleges at the same time, throughout their senior year, and potentially audition, because I just see no downside in that. Them sort of going through that process with their peers, I think is huge.
Yeah. And it would also be instructive. So if they did go to a company, they would at least know what the process is and could engage in it, already being familiar with it, and maybe even more comfortable, more confident.
Yeah.
That's a great suggestion.
I also think about going to, if you're going to visit colleges, take a look at their performance schedule, and if possible, try to see schools and try to go see a show, So in addition to maybe trying to sit in on a dance class, go to see a show. I visited Connecticut College. I did a counselor program there a couple of years ago, and it would happen to be the weekend of their huge dance celebration where all of campus is involved in these dance productions. And it left me with such a great feeling about that school, and such an understanding of the type of kid that would fit in there.
One of the things that I thought was really helpful is I worked with students at one particular high school here in LA, Arcadia High School, and their dance department was extraordinary. Their senior showcase, I couldn't believe what I was seeing on the stage. Yeah. And a lot of the students were so focused on their academics it's almost like they forgot that they had a dance body or a dance like heart. And when I would say, well, these schools, Emory has this amazing dance program at Connecticut College. And then we would go and look at the video. Like I remember once, I won't say what school it was, but we looked at the dance work at a very prestigious school, and they were like, their eyes like really big because they were like, gosh, we're better than everybody in this program.
Right.
And they were like, I don't want to go there because if that's the kind of dance, it's not going to move me forward at all.
Right.
And it was great because we took this really selected college off the list because they were like, no.
So funny. That happens all the time for me when working with students, once they dig into the repertoire. Yeah.
They're like, oh, no. All right, let's transition to music. In that is instrumental, vocal work. That's sort of a larger category, but what's sort of timeline process? And again, I would imagine with the list, it's going to be a combo of BFA, BA, maybe conservatory if they're really, really strong and want to go in depth.
So Bachelor of Music programs are, that conservatory style program, whether that's at a conservatory or whether it's at a program within a larger university. The thing with music is that it is so dependent on the instrument and the style. I've worked with classical musicians, I've worked with jazz musicians, vocalists. So one of the things that I really recommend for musicians is to set up what are called trial lessons or consultation lessons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know a lot of students do not know about this, and hopefully if a student's applying to a Bachelor of Music program, they would have a faculty member, teacher, or a private teacher for musicians, or an orchestra conductor who could be a really valuable resource, because the music world is very small, and oftentimes the private teacher knows that student really well. So I would rely on the private teacher first and foremost. Have an early conversation with your private teacher in probably maybe January of your junior year or sometime in your junior year, and let them know that you're interested in applying to Bachelor of Music programs, because they can help to maybe leverage some of their own connections or knowledge at different schools. So setting up a trial lesson, I usually have students, and the way that you do that is simply by reaching out to faculty at that school and asking for a trial lesson. And usually they can happen in person, or some are over Zoom, thanks to COVID.
Yeah.
So the only good thing, I guess, but that's a great way to learn about a studio and a school and a teacher, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with a private teacher. So definitely do that. And then you can expect for many instruments to have pre-screening requirements, and some of these requirements are pretty robust, I would say, depending on the school. So you want to look early, and often some students have to learn a lot of additional repertoire for Bachelor of Music programs. So you might expect that. And then, of course, you go to your auditions, and something that I think a lot of students might not realize about some of these auditions is that they can sometimes have an additional component to them, music theory test or sight reading or play the piano. So just, again, look at the requirements for every school, because it really does depend. But that's where you can reference that trusty spreadsheet that we talked about.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would also say that with musicians, a lot of musicians get really tied to specific faculty members. And as a counselor, if there are counselors listening, I would say really encourage your students to also think about what else matters. Just like you would with an athlete, with like what if you break your leg? It's like, well, what if your private teacher retires? Or I've had students go to study with a private teacher who then moves to another school. And then it's sort of like, well, what do you do? Hopefully you still like the school in general.
Right. That sort of leads to the question, we talked about this and when we were prepping,
Mm-hmm.
how does a student get a gauge on talent? Because
Oh, I know.
that's the linchpin. Like if not that it's not there, but if it's not at a certain level,
Yeah.
or it's the right match for a program,
Right.
there can be some sad days.
Yeah.
How does a student? I think one thing we talked about, doing summer programs, because
Yeah.
I remember I had a student who went to I think it was vocal for at Carnegie Mellon, and it became really clear to them that they weren't a match for that particular program, and they found a much better program. They ended up at Belmont, in
Oh,
Nashville,
nice. Yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was more contemporary, and they had some gospel stuff that she thrived. And she still sings professionally today, but that was really instructive to
Yeah.
her. But so would you say that putting yourself out there is going to be in lots of different contexts, going to these national audition days, or how would you get a sense of
Yeah.
your talent?
I do think so. Hopefully, if a student is applying for bachelor music programs, they're involved pretty heavily in their orchestras or bands or ensembles in some way at their schools or within their communities. And so that is often, as a counselor, one of my first questions in trying to gauge a student's kind of level of commitment, at least to the music, is understanding what they're involved in kind of outside of school. Summer programs are great. They can be expensive. Of course, this is the issue with summer programs in general, but they can be really wonderful. And what's great about a lot of them is that they're faculty from various schools around the country. I have a student who's going to a great music program called Meadowmount and studying with a professor from Rice. And, these professors really go and they travel to these music programs. So they can be really wonderful. And it doesn't mean that you need to spend a lot of money or spend the entire summer at a music program. Some of them are shorter than, 6 weeks, but that can be great. And talking to your private teacher. And also I think that looking at the requirements for admission can give a student a window into what kind of level they might need to be at, also to see, so especially some of the most selective schools sort of add on repertoire. And sometimes that's a good signal to a student that it maybe, it either is a great fit or it might not be. But also, to what we were talking about earlier, look at some of their you follow them on Instagram or some social media, and listen to the rep. And students are usually pretty self-aware.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And it's also looking at the requirements. Like if they're going to have a music theory test and you've never taken any theory, you've got to back the truck up and take some music theory so you can do well on that part of.
Yes. Like if you don't know what the word solfege means, you might want to go and take some music theory. And yes, absolutely. Or if you don't know how to sight read for some of these schools, you might need to.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And then the last category, visual arts. That could be fine arts. It could be graphic design, architecture, film is all in that section. Talk about, I just gave you like such a broad area.
Well, let me split it between visual arts and then film separately. Okay, so I can talk about visual arts and architecture, but then I'll talk separately about film because it's a little bit different. But I think some of the things, a lot of what we've been talking about sort of applies to visual art programs too. But there's a couple kind of practical pieces of advice that I can give to students too. I mean, looking at the requirements. So for visual arts programs, some of them have what's called a foundation year, and some of them are kind of direct admit to major. And so thinking about that's a really good place to start for visual artists to decide, do I want a foundation year program where essentially I'm taking classes in a lot of different disciplines to then sort of like choose a major after that? Or am I applying directly as, a photography major or a fine arts major? So that's one of the first things I have students do. It's not to say that you can then only apply to foundation year programs or only apply to direct admit programs, but I think that can be a great first step for students. And working, to your earlier point, getting a head start on your portfolio for visual artists. I mean, you really can't rush visual art and architecture. So usually the students have to submit between 10 to 20 pieces for a visual art portfolio. I don't know a visual artist who can work in the span of a week and sort of cram that. It's very difficult to do. So starting early in high school, and also just if there are younger listeners, take pictures of your work from early on, because they can also, first of all, it could be great content. It can also show your progression as an artist that some schools might like to see, is kind of how you've grown as an artist. I think that there are some schools that still have home tests or challenges or additional requirements for visual artists. Some schools have gotten rid of those too, because they were a lot for students to do. But I think for visual artists also, the artist statement is really important. So a lot of schools ask students to think about, what's your process as an artist? Is there any sort of thematic focus of your work? What are the key ideas or struggles or goals within your work? What inspires you as an artist? So it's a great opportunity for students to be able to reflect about who they are as an artist. So just know that you're going to have to do that. And just as a resource, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago has a fabulous PDF. You can just Google it. It's like how to write an artist statement, and they actually kind of break it down for you, and it's
nice.
Really helpful and wonderful. Yeah. And then what I would say to visual artists, which goes to the question that you asked about getting your work seen, is there are a couple opportunities for visual artists to communicate directly with the people who are going to be reading their application. And so one of them is National Portfolio Day, which happens in cities across the country. My advice to students for National Portfolio Day is don't wait in long lines. Go and talk to smaller programs that will help you to, or lesser known, not necessarily smaller, but that will help you to really build your list of schools. And it also just gets you practice talking about yourself as an artist, which I think is very difficult, because a lot of students in the beginning just think, well, I don't know, I just like art. I don't know how else to tell you. And it's like, well, no, but we want to understand your process. And so doing that, getting in front of admission reps, visual art admission reps are the best. They are so there for you. And there's another great resource called AICAD, AICAD, which is the Association, I'm going to get it wrong, but it's Independent Colleges of Art and Design. And students can actually go on and upload some images and then have it sent to admission offices. I just had a junior do it like a month ago. She heard back immediately from SVA and RISD with feedback on her portfolio that was so helpful for her moving forward. Students can get conflicting feedback, right? Or from school to school get conflicting feedback. But I always just remind students, if you're trying to find fit and one school is telling you one thing and one school is telling you another thing, you need to think then about how that aligns with what you're looking for in a school. But I think it's really helpful, particularly for visual artists, to get your work seen often, talk about yourself as an artist, and be okay taking feedback.
Yeah. I think also showing interest in the arts, the visual arts, in other ways. So, if your school sets up, or you help set up the gallery or the spring show or the winter show, working in museums, they have student volunteers. Some of them have, here in LA, there are a lot of teen councils at the MoCA, at the Broad, at the LACMA. They all have teen councils, and that gives you exposure and it shows that you're interested in that. And then I often encourage visual artists to take art history.
Yes.
Because if you
Yes.
don't have, this isn't a vacuum. You've got this opportunity to study thousands of years of art. And if you can
Absolutely.
talk cogently and logically about art in a historical context, I think that would be really interesting to an admissions person.
Totally.
And you're right. I've seen a lot of schools like BU, you can arrange a time. You can
Yes.
go
Oh,
on the
yeah.
website.
You can just do that. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And they can look, they say, send me 5 pictures or 3
Yep.
pictures before the meeting. And then they'll talk about what they like and what else you might think about.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I'm telling you, do it. And a lot of times, yes, you can just set it up online. And if you can't then just reach out to them. They're really, really there for you. I love visual arts reps.
Friends, this concludes part 4 of the 5-part interview with Sarah Lovely. We hope you join us next week for the final part. On Thursday's episode, Andy Strickler continues part 5 of 7 of our deep dive on athletics and college admissions. You heard Kevin Newton do a 4-parter on universities in London. Well, he's doing it first. He's taken a question from a listener. Dale from Virginia has a question about international schools and the IB program, and Kevin will answer that for us. And we have a brand new interview. I've never done a 2-hour deep dive on a school spotlight, a college spotlight, but that's what I did with David Graves, and we'll run it about 25 minutes a week over the next 5 weeks, doing a deep dive on UGA. And our college spotlight is our interview. Friends, remember, hard work beats talent when talent refuses to work hard. See you on Thursday, friends, and by then, I will have visited 4 schools in San Diego. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.